Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Are these all working? Good. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming along. My name is John Watt. I am on the board member of Community Land Scotland. I've a bit of history in working with community land over the years and used to work for Highlands and Islands Enterprise, as Chessa will remember, if you can remember that far back. So it's a delight for me to be back in Orkney. I haven't been here for quite a long time, although I used to come quite regularly in the old days. We're having this in person, but we're also having people listening and watching, I hope, online. My colleague Meg's got her hands on all the electronics. So if people are coming to speak, remember this is a mic that broadcasts to the world, as well as to this room. It's a great program this afternoon, and I don't want to waste too much time because I know there's one or two people that are having to leave quite sharply. So we'll get through this quickly, and it's an enviable job for me to be here and doing this, but it's unenviable because I'm the guy who's got to say, sorry, you've spoken long enough. We have to keep to time. Three bits to this afternoon's activities. I'm going to ask Lindsay Chalmers from Community Land Scotland just to give a quick oversight of the day and of the afternoon and the work of Community Land Scotland. Then we've got three presentations from very active development trusts from three different islands, indicating how much is going on in Orkney just now. I used to be part of the Scottish Land Fund, and in those days, not that much was coming from Orkney, and now it seems there's a deluge from Orkney of projects, which is very healthy. It's great. I'm sure they're delighted to process all these regularly. So three presentations, and at the end, I'll be having a panel discussion with a couple of extra the visitors who would like to say a few things can add to the overall discussion. So, Lindsay, I think without further ado, I was going to talk about fire and all these things. I have no idea what you do if there's a fire. I should know, shouldn't I? Yeah, you get out quickly. There's a stair right in here, so I'd get down it if I were you. And there's toilets over there, very close. So those are the things we're supposed to remember. I think. Turn your phones off. It was always fags, phones, and fires. That's good to do this. So Lindsay, I'll sit down.
Thanks, John. Yes, I'm the development manager at Community Land Scotland. So I'm just going to give you a kind of very quick overview of who we are and what we do. But Meg's asked me to tell you that if you signed up through Eventbrite, you'll get sent a copy of the PowerPoint presentations afterwards. If you didn't sign up through Eventbrite, you can give Meg your details and she'll add you to the mailing list to send everything out. So who's Community Land Scotland? So we were set up back in 2010 by some of the early big community-owned estates like Egilsay and Knoydart. Their feeling was that there needed to be an organisation that would press the government and other agencies for more support for community ownership. So we were set up particularly with that agenda, and we do a whole range of work. So one of the biggest things we do is around policy, so campaigning on behalf of our members to make it easier to buy land and assets. But we also campaign for our existing members who've already bought assets. So our work varies from things around the land reform bill to nature and biodiversity, green capital, making it easier to repopulate places, mineralist land. So we've got a very busy policy manager in the organisation who kind of takes all the problems that Meg and I collect when we're out talking to community landowners, and then we just pass them on to him to try and resolve them all. So I think he's in Parliament today actually representing our members in there. But then we also do support. So a lot of the work we do is around peer-to-peer support because our members do a massive range of different things, from spaceports to housing, all the things you'll be familiar with. And we provide support to groups as well, particularly around kind of early stage support. We have a whole range of webinars on our website where we've got community landowners to talk about particular subjects. So we've got ones on housing, renewables, where people come along and kind of share their own expertise that they've learned along the way. And this, what we're recording today, will not only be, isn't just for you and for the people who are on the live stream, we'll also be putting it on our website as well for anyone that wants to find out more about what's happening in Orkney, because I think what we've seen over the last couple of days would be of interest to lots of our members all over Scotland. We also do awareness raising work as well, trying to help people get a better understanding of what community ownership is and what community landowners do. We've got a whole cultural strand to our work as well, and part of that is this project we're running at the moment called Linn and fhearainn. Next slides. No. It's a project called Linn and fhearainn, 100 Years of Community Ownership. So we've got funding from the Heritage Lottery because it's the 100th anniversary this year of the first community buyout, which is in Stornoway in the Western Isles. And the Stornoway Trust bought a whole load of land and the town from Lord Leverhulme. We're very aware that community landowners are very busy people, and often they're just like sticking their documents in the shredder because they're so good at GDPR. So we've got some funding from the Heritage Lottery to try and collect some of those stories before they're lost. So as part of that project, we're running a series of roadshows around Scotland, which gave us a great excuse to come to Orkney. I haven't been here for 6 years, which is a shame because there's just so much going on here. But we're also running a project where we're collecting histories from communities. So if your community wants to get trained up, I know there's a lot of heritage knowledge already in Orkney, but if you're interested in getting some help to record your project, we can put you in touch with our colleague who's leading on that project. And the idea is we'll be gathering stories from across Scotland of community ownership. They'll be going on a website. We're also doing a travelling exhibition over the summer around Scotland, taking stories of community ownership with us. So I'm just going to very briefly touch on routes to community ownership in case there's anyone at early stages in the room. I know a lot of you are post-acquisition organisations, but there's three main routes to community ownership in Scotland. Community Land Scotland tends to deal primarily with supporting groups going through the acquisition of private land, whereas the Development Trust Association Scotland's got a service which some of you might have come across called the Community Ownership Service Scotland, which supports acquisition from public bodies. So we just refer people looking to go down that route to them. The three main routes are negotiation, where you have a community that's looking to buy an asset from a landowner who's willing to sell to the community. The normal route for that is to go through the Scottish Land Fund for acquisition. It's the easiest route. I mean, you'll know yourselves, it's not plain sailing going to a community buyout, but it's probably the easiest of the three routes to go through. Then there's community right to buy. So there's 4 different strands to community right to buy. Happy to have a chat with people in more detail, but the 2 main strands you might want to look at are the preemptive community right to buy. That effectively puts a freeze on the sale of land or buildings. So if a community has got something in their area that they're worried is going to sell and they're not going to get a chance to buy it, you can go through community right to buy, and it will mean that you get first dibs on the asset when it comes up for sale. I couldn't see any community right to buy registrations on the register. I was having a look this morning. So if anyone does want to explore that, we're happy to have a chat about that. And then there's a new one called Part 5, which is for sustainable development. And that's effectively a compulsory purchase. So it's where a community can show that buying particular land or building is needed for the sustainable development of their community, which could be housing, economic, environmental reasons. And the community can go through a process of compulsory purchase. It's a complex process, a lot of work, but there are a couple of communities that are at the end stages of doing that. So we're going to have a few communities, hopefully in the next year, that have come out the other side of that process, which will make it much easier for any community that wants to follow what they're doing. And the final one is asset transfer. So communities of geography or communities of interest can ask to lease or buy assets from most devolved public bodies in Scotland, and that's the one that the Community Ownership Support Service specialises in. So that's a very brief overview, but I'm not going to drown you in information about community ownership just now, but I suppose the main thing to say is that we're there to help if you want to chat about any of this in the future. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep things moving. I'm going to move over here. Lisa Marie from Shapinsay and Davy. I don't know if you're doing a two-header or a joint position. And I'll let you explain who you are and where you fit in, and let you just go on with it. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Don't walk through there.
So I'm David Kirkwall. I do projects with Shapinsay. I've been involved in 20 successful Scottish land applications in Scotland Orkney now. To give you context, what they're saying before, I think last year we took about 17% of Scottish land fund budget in Scotland was in Orkney. So that shows how much we're doing in the last few years, and there's plans for more to come. So obviously there's going to be budget issues, but there's going to be a little more in that space. So in Shapinsay in 2020 we started a 5-year development plan, a large consultation with the island of what the island is needed in terms of creating a successful, sustainable island. Housing was a huge one that came up on that. There's our boathouse there. That's our offices and our e-bike shed. That's been taken the last few years. But the main one and the first one was housing for all. So the two on the left, that's our phase one. That's completed now. Top one was a private sale, negotiated sale with a individual island, and the second one was a negotiated sale with a local authority, where we actually negotiated a discount on that. So that took us down to a level where the intervention rate of Scottish Land Fund was that great that the discount the council made us to get the asset for zero in terms of no capital ask. That too were heavily towards our school role. Our school's starting to dwindle. So in terms of being reactive, we had to get more kids in school, or teachers would potentially lose their jobs, i.e. reduction of staff. So that too has been successful. That's a stage, that was £500,000 project. We in the next 3 years with the rentals coming in, that'll be the risk gone financially. So that'll be absolutely cost neutral for us, and that's 2 families in there. Phase 2 on the right hand side, that's a house that we just purchased last 2 months ago, was it? 2 months, and I think that was a great success. From talking to the individual and buying it through Scottish Land Fund, it's 10 months, which is really, really fast for that process. And then the last one here, this is kind of the one, that's Balfour Cottages. That's an old tenement style cottage building that is seen better days, and we're going through a process now of putting planning application in to basically, unfortunately, rip that down and replace it with 4 individual 2-bedroom houses for elderly. But in terms of what the islanders want it to actually look like it was before, so it'll look like that. It'll be a far more efficient building, and it'll be for the elderly. Um, Depending on the demand, but primarily for the elderly. So that's where we're going at the moment.
Both of those were ones that islanders came to us and said, we want to sell the trust these houses. So they kind of came left field.
Absolutely. I think on that point, Lisa did a little work behind the scenes. We did a lot of asset mapping with the island. We talked to every individual on the island that had a building or land. I'll be honest, 7 out of 10 came back saying, no, we actually want the most money we can when we sell, so we'll go private. Fair enough. We've got a few people saying we want the community to have first chance, and we've got let's say we've got maybe a couple of hidden gems with some farmers in the background that nothing's for sale, but a conversation will always be had for a little pocket of space. So the next 10 years for Shapinsay is more or less sorted in terms of housing permission. This is a big project. This is our 5-year development plan. We bought this land from Scotland Land Fund last year. Literally, it's a 5-year development plan on one side. So on the bottom left, you'll see an enterprise zone. That's going to be a community space for things like potentially men's shed. It could be a tool library. It could be spaces for clinical space for people to rent. It could be it could be future proofing it for something bigger. Down the middle, that's going to be houses that we'll build again, 2 3-bedroom, 2 2-bedroom for local families. And bottom right, that's going to be our community tourism. I think community tourism is a huge thing at the moment where people are a bit scared of how many people comes on the island. So if we can control it as a community, and then we can actually, so that could potentially could be pods, it could be caravan spaces. We're not sure yet. Top right one, that's probably the most exciting one. That looks like houses. That's going to be service plots that we'll give to youngsters on the island for very, very little money, and we've got a burden attached to it. So, for instance, we'll give the site for pennies in the pound. They'll build their house, and if they sell it to them, we get first choice to buy it back, and we actually, if we don't want it, we'll get the value of the site back as well. So it means that it keeps in the community. Top left, there are going to be community allotments, there's going to be community growing spaces and community gardening, and then the red line is a wellbeing walk. So that's a 5-year, probably £4 million project that will be starting in 2 years, because we've got housing at the moment. We've got the second of housing will take 2 years. So I think for me, experiences, we always have we've got kind of 4 strands in the trust. We've got a short-term project, we've got medium and long-term, and the fourth one, we've got a very reactive board that we explore every opportunity. So if a house or a building comes to the community, we can maybe take it out of the equation, but we're always exploring things. So that's it. So before moving to Smithy, I think that the biggest thing in terms of what you see from us and from Rousay and Westray, yes, there is resources we have. So some islands don't have the resources, but I think how we're doing well now is because we're putting the staff resources in the right areas in terms of project delivery, and that's where we're trying to escalate. And I think the kind of the equation I was talking about previously on it, I go to community groups the whole time and talk to them, and they go, "What's the risk? What's the risk? What's the risk?" And I balance up going, "What's the risk to the community if you don't take it on?" And that gets the conversation going. But I'll pass on to Lisa. This is a cafe restaurant that we've got Scottish Land Fund money as well, but Lisa can talk about that.
So yeah, we took on this money last, no, it was a year,
18 months.
yeah, 18 months ago, and opened it in June last year. It has been our biggest success story, but also our biggest headache. It was owned by the community council ran it for Orkney Islands Council, and they got to a stage where it was just too expensive. They franchised it and they couldn't get anybody that wanted to run it because it was just too expensive to run. The hydro costs were getting out of hand, and it was needing a lot done to it, and needing a big investment, and the council just couldn't get that money in. So they approached us as a trust to see if we would like to take it on, to purchase it. And so at that point we did some community consultation, and the feeling very much was that they wanted to keep it within the community. The council gave us a discount on it, which again meant that we could buy it cost neutral. And we started the process of doing it up last Christmas time, and with funding from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Community Development Fund, Pears, North Isles Landscape Partnership. We're really lucky because it's the Heritage Centre is up the stairs and it's a listed building, so we were able to tap into heritage funding, which meant that again we were able to do it up, and it basically cost the trust nothing. Obviously we've invested a lot in it since, but it cost nothing to get into that stage. I can't think what else to say about it. It's well, yeah, the successes of it have been that we have been able to give 20 plus members of the community a job. A lot of them, it's their first ever job. We've had 13, 14, 15-year-olds who come in and it's their first ever job. So we're upskilling them and giving them confidence that and opportunities that they would never have had if they had to go and work on the mainland. My daughter, for example, she would never have had the confidence to go and work on the Kirkwall mainland, but just in the year that she's worked there and her friends, there's huge differences in their confidence. And we took them into the college for the last 3 weeks, and we've done a front of house training, customer service training with them, and just to see the difference in them in that year has just been brilliant. So that's the main success story we've got for it. And we've done like winter warmers, which is like a discounted meal for the winter time for anybody on the island, not just old folk and young folk, whatever, for anybody that wanted it. And we've done, we're doing takeaways and just providing a service for the island that wasn't there before. And we've had a huge increase in our visitor numbers, and that's without doing any advertising, because last year we decided we weren't going to advertise because we wanted to have a soft opening. And there was nothing soft about our opening. It just went crazy right from the start. So we hit the ground running, and we just ran the whole summer. So
I was going to say success for us is that we've probably running at about 60% capacity, and we've had about threshold in 8 months.
Yeah.
For an island of 300 people. So that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
So that's us.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's really inspiring stuff, and I knew little bits of what was going on there, but I didn't know the whole picture, and I didn't know the aspiration, which is they must love you in Scottish Land Fund when they say not him again. That's great. I've never been to Shapinsay, so I'm really got an incentive to go there. One island I'd never been to until yesterday was Rousay, and Stuart can tell us what's going on there, and I can assure you there's a considerable amount going on there as well. So, Stuart.
Thank you, John. It's always, my heart always sinks when you've got to follow Shapinsay. Because they've got so much going on, haven't they? There you go. As long as we're in front of Westray, it doesn't really matter. So my name's Stuart Williams. I'm the trust manager at Rousay, Egilsay Wyre Development Trust. And for those of you not in the room that don't know where we are, I thought I'd give you a bit of an idea. And we're obviously a blank space. So we're obviously on the Orkney Isles today, and we are just by the so south of Westray, smaller and nicer. But we're ferry linked. We've got 6 ferries a day. Along like Shapinsay, we're kind of like a commuter island, so you can get off quite easy and get on. So it does put a different aspect to the island. So in 2019, we actually bought some proper land, not just little bits. So we bought about 15% of the island in an unusual package of mostly soggy sphagnum moss, very wet, boggy land, but beautiful in its own right. So it was 1,710 acres, and we now own most of that. So we were awarded £260,000 from the Scottish Land Fund, and that basically facilitated us buying that land. So what did we want to do it for? Well, here we are, that's the view, and you can see just in the distance is our community wind turbine, which is on the land. And by buying the land, it meant that we had access to that without having to pay rent. So it was a financial investment for us. It meant that we keep more of the money that comes from the community turbine. And it also means we can do more with the land as well. So it was a secondary thing in that you own it, you can manage it, you can do the best for the land, the wildlife, the flora and the fauna. One of the big projects we took on straight away was that the land fund helped the project manager and an estate ranger, and the ranger put together a project which means you can get people were very keen on the island to get access to the land better. And it's not the best thing. I can assure you, if you walk across it, you go up above your knee straight away. It's that sort of marshy. But by putting this boardwalk in, it gives access to all abilities, even non-ambulant people can get right out into the middle of the moorland, see the wildlife and see the amazing views. So this time last year, we officially opened it. It's a fairly substantial structure. I could recommend coming to Rousay and having a look because it really is an amazing place. And just to give you a bit of an idea, we've got a little video showing the vast amount of nothing that we own. So that's a 900 kilowatt turbine, and last year that put £400,000 into the coffers of the Community Development Trust. So you can see we overlook all the other islands, look down on them and respect them greatly. So this has been really popular. We've made a sort of a bit of a parking space up there, and anybody can go up and have a look around. So what we're doing next, we've got, as I said, the boardwalk's now got its parking space. It's drawing people up there to come and have a look at it. We've got interpretation being designed to talk about community energy, a little bit about the history of peat and how that powered the islands. Wind, and even though we looked down on the EMEC site on the tidal, talking about that. We've had a full report done on the actual estate and what we can, the option of looking at agriculture, access, but mainly peat and restoration. And on the back of that, we are employing an estate ranger. We're just advertising for that now. We've got funding through the Crown Estate Community Land Development Fund to part fund that. And this is a picture of the boathouse that's on our community lock, which was good fun. Apparently there's lovely fish in there, but we don't have fishing rights. We've got the lock, we don't have the fishing rights. So I don't know how we quite work that one out. And we're looking at developing that as a little bit of a sort of a shelter for visitors and understand the wildlife. So I think our journey has been very interesting. And what it's done is given us the confidence for the community to think, well, we can actually achieve that. I mean, it was a big step for them to buy this, but I think they acknowledge that it's changed the way that they look at it. And we've now got 4 Scottish Land Fund bids ongoing. David's had a little bit of something to do with that. But the community have got that bit between their teeth and thinking, well, ownership is actually quite a good thing. So it gives the confidence, and I think that's what we take away from it, that it can be really very healthy. And there's the view. Come to Rousay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And I would echo that, having been yesterday. It was just an inspirational visit. And you only went through probably half of what you could have gone through in terms of other projects you got online as well. Canadians are very good at keeping to time, so we probably have a bit of time towards the end of this. If people have one or two specific questions for the specific people. Now I'm going to change the arrangements here, so you don't have to stand here, Gina. So my will be at the back. Well, I'm keep me right here. I think if I put this here.
I will say, you'll not notice any difference because I'm not that tall anyway.
You have to turn your chair
Thank you.
so you can
Yes,
see.
I will do that.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
This is Gina from Westray.
Yeah. And Stuart's being very cheeky to me because he's leaving, but also he's intimidated because actually me and Lisa are both from Westray. Davey's got Westray connections, so he just feels sad all the time. So, I'm from Westray. Just a quick introduction, the Westray Development Group was established in 1987 when we held a island conference. In 1998, Westray Development Trust was registered as charity then the following year, and our aims are beautiful and long, and if you read them, I'll just buckle them, but they're on our website. So the first sort of community ownership that the trust got into was a little plot of land that they could build a youth centre in it. This is the Hoffin. A need for a safe place for the young folk to hang out in was established at that 1998 conference. And then in 2000, the Hoffin was opened. It's an unmanned facility, and it really runs in trust between us as a trust, the community, the users, and the parents. Because I'm not supervised in it, and it works 98.9% of the time. The next sort of big bit of land was the golf course. This was it's difficult to describe, but this was a links farmland, so very sandy. Sort of the end of it. Not going to try and do anything fancy. The end of it had eroded. It's like if you've ever been to Westray, you've been to Grovist, a lot of that had been eroded by the sea. They bought it as it was, and the Westray Development just bought it through Scottish Land Fund, and they lease it to the Westray Golf Club, and the Westray Golf Club have actually developed it then with help for us through grants, things like that. But they've saved 10 acres of land, basically, which I find quite exciting. It's taken a lot of time, but it's 95% funded. That was it's a long time ago. The other bit of land that we have is lots of little bits of land, not like Rousay, sorry. It's a community wind turbine, so we have a 900 kilowatt community turbine, which is managed by our trading subsidiary, which is quite a successful turbine because they built it at the right time and got in before folk realised that they could make lots of money in turbines in Orkney because it was really windy, and then they put in new roofs. That turbine helps us do things like run the Hoffin and work community gardening, and we also have a grant system that we give out on the island. But yeah, so the other bit of ground that we own is the community garden, which was funded via Scottish Land Fund, Leader, Highlands Islands Enterprise. This was bought, it's right next to our offices, and it was a way of you to reduce food miles. So they did that, and we had funding to do that for 5 years. We grew a lot of fruit and veg, we grew a lot of soft fruits. We grew the most expensive tomato that ever was because we extended the season. But obviously extending the season in Orkney means more power and things like that. But we explored hydroponics. They've done a lot of things in 5 years. At the moment, I only started this job 18 months ago, so I've just thrown all that out, and it was something that wasn't really working very well. We lost our lead gardener, so new at the moment we're turning it into a real community space, so more of a community hub where folk can come and grow their own veg. They can spend time with each other socially. So we'll see how that goes. So I guess that's sort of an example of if you start with an idea, it might not be the thing that carries on. It might not, you can evolve. Oh, there's Bayview. So that's kind of our biggest, this is our one and only Hussein project. Fairview is the Harbour Master's, former Harbour Master's house at Pier. We bought it for the council. And as you can see for the photos, we stripped it. It actually didn't even have 4 walls at one point. It was like 3.5. So yeah, we've turned it into 4 self-contained flats. So there's 3 one-bedroom flats, and then at the top there's a 2-bedroom flat. Sorry, my photos. That was Bayview, that was very fast. What next? So the trust have been quite, I think, risk averse maybe in the past when it comes to buying things. I think like Shapinsay and Rousay were well ahead in the last 10 years. We're not going to be that anymore. We've just seen a new conference. So what we're doing is we are looking at Hussein. We're actually looking at community spaces. So this hall at the top is an old community hall. The community cabin said to us, we can't, it's up for sale and we can't have it not being used. The community, can we get it back? We're not sure what we're going to do with it, but we're in the moment, at the moment, we're looking at Scottish Land Fund feasibility study to find out what they want and does it make sense. Looking at a new, it's probably going to be a knock-down job and start again, but and then Westray is, I suppose, like a lot of the islands, houses are really hard to come by because they get bought up really quickly. But this is a house that's been on the market for a pretty while and we've been looking at because really we've lost quite a few families the last 3 years because lack of housing means that they can't actually stay there to do the jobs that they got. So we want to stop that. Seems it's very like nothing's changed really in 25 years. If you don't have a house, you can't stay somewhere. So why is community ownership important? I always like to have a photo of kids and things because that's me. I used to be an early years practitioner, but really it is any community land that we have bought has, I don't think I've said it very eloquently, but any land that we have bought has always had a purpose. It's always been for the community. It's always been community led because I think if you start buying things just for the sake of it, it probably is not going to work out that well. So as long as you can, if you're looking at community land ownership, minding on your basics. Why are we doing it? Why is it important? And it's always about your kids in the future. I think I've waffled on for plenty. I have nothing bad to say about Rousay, so I think I'll just stop. I'm trying so hard. But yeah.
Thanks very much. Couple of minutes. One or two here. You must and not the first part. People have any specific questions for the speakers so far. And maybe if you could come up, the reason I would ask you just to come up is just to get to the microphone for the online stuff. Otherwise, we hear you soon.
Just gonna say, you're not leaving me alone.
If you pick somebody between Westray and Rousay.
So really,
So there's very inspirational stories here. Those of you who are at another stage are interested in this or don't know so much about this, have you got any question about what to ask or any clarifications of points they've made? Yes?
Can I ask about keeping a thing going, the sustainability of it with regards to the people involved? I mean, do you find that a problem or do people keep coming to work with you on things, or does it kind of feed off of it and there's just a few people left doing the project?
Like, that's a good question. I'll just again for the microphone in case I didn't pick you up, but it's a question about sustainability, about maintaining people's enthusiasm and activity. It's also about succession, where people move on or get tired, or it's a situation all communities face at different times. You seem to have been able to continue the energy one way or the other, but maybe you haven't, and you tell me I'm wrong. One at a time. Westray first.
I think it swings and roundabouts, is it now? I think every development trust, if I'm glad I'm first, if they tell you that it's not, they're lying. I think that Westray had great success in the first 5-10 years. It was like the poster boy of development trust, and it's been quiet since then. So I think it is. You get your volunteer. We're boards volunteer, so you get your volunteer fatigue. We're very lucky that we have a turbine that we can have staff now, which again changes it slightly. There's an expectation, I think, when you've paid staff that we're miracle workers and that we can do all of it. Yeah, neat we were. But yeah, I think that's something that's heavily. So I've just done Scottish Land Fund. Davy has helped me to Scottish Land Fund. So, and one of their big questions is, have you got the capacity to do this? Which I think is something really important. Like Shapinsay obviously they've got their phases, running into it. But I think it is hard on islands. I think there is swings and roundabouts with it. But as long as you focus on the highs and know the lows.
Yeah, I think
Keep
what
going.
get on board when you're at the highest.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
when things are working. That's when people are like, oh, I would like to get involved in that.
Yeah.
And it's when it starts to kind of if you lose one board member, it can change
Mhm.
the entire dynamic, and then suddenly people don't want to get involved because your successes are not up there anymore. And a lot of depends on personality.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you do have to rely on.
I think it's to kind of keep it fresh in terms of capacity in a board. For instance, we're looking at doing subgroups, so actually getting people on the island that are maybe not interested in the trust per se, but interested in housing. So we're actually trying to get people in and potentially get them interested. It's never happened yet. We're talking about even creating a youth board, trying to get under 21s involved and give them a small budget. That's never happened yet because of so many things happening. But
It's really hard to engage them.
Shapinsay 5 years ago was probably, I would say, quite sceptical. It was an island that's probably not torn, but we got through a couple of tangible results. We got housing, and it's luckily it's worked out, and we did it for the reasons intended to. But to be honest, we've got 3 islands that have got resources and staff. There's a lot of people that go through this that don't have that. That's why we're escalating things quite fast. We've got the capacity, and funding's going to get tighter. So we've probably these 3 examples are we've got really forward-thinking boards going the next 5 years. Let's get our business done, basically, because housing, for instance, Shapinsay are probably a bit further ahead in housing, and we're looking at about 10 houses, which would be equivalent of about £60,000 of revenue a year for when the turbine stops. We'd actually be sustainable. So we're trying to think ahead. But yes, capacity. One little tip is we're doing Scottish Land Fund stage 2 applications is to put in capacity as a revenue cost in you, and you get 12 months of support as well. So that's a crucial thing that gets people further ahead in the game as well.
So I think from my point of view, yes, it's paid staff are critical to this. Really, that's the key thing, and it is pretty much the paid staff driving it most of the time and coming up with the ideas to feed to the board. I feel like a salesman half the time. Like, sell to them, this is a good idea. I think communications is a big thing. If you communicate with your community and you tell them what's happening, and you can communicate in a sales way again, this is going to make a transformation to what we're going to do. So that's it. But the third thing I'd say is that as a group, we work really well together. The community development trusts in Orkney are pulled together through HIE, where we meet every 2 weeks, and that's probably the most powerful group of people that can get together, because you all just think, oh God, Westray doing that again. So it drives you on to think you can't do this. And yeah, I'm not blowing smoke up his ass, but he's quite good.
That's a good question. Good question. Certainly, in my experience of working with these organisations, there's sometimes big enthusiasm builds up to actually acquire an asset. And the critical thing is then that period where sometimes nothing happens, but you need to get the money to do something with it. And then that you can get a slump of enthusiasm. So it's keeping that momentum going. It keeps your volunteers and your boards.
One ingredient I probably missed. One ingredient that's been really important this last 5 years. I don't know if it's COVID or whatever happened, but relationship with the local authority has always been good. But this last 5 years has been very strong. It's a stage where they're kind of partnership projects, and having that local authority fund is important, but local authority, I've seen a big step this last 5 years, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing as well. So it's a real, we go to them for problem solutions, and it's a conversation where previously it didn't happen. A lot has come down to our productiveness, but a really strong partnership with local authority, and that's been a huge factor this last 5 years especially.
Compliments to local authority, Higgins. Do you want to respond?
Tell us, take out, just come next week as well.
Good. Other questions, specific questions? Yeah, please.
Many communities and getting their buy-in and things like that. I was just wondering the rest of the day that if I did come to things and if I didn't always want. How do you do that in the small island communities? Is there specific sort of ways that you do that? And then what is the training for when you go out for consultation? Do you have a really good success rate or how do you find that on island?
Okay, again, just to translate from question about community consultation, how you do it, what successes you've had, and especially in smaller communities, smaller islands.
I think for me, the dry sense of course is the surveys that the work the test extent. The best that we had in Shapinsay was last year. We had a project kind of forward thinking meeting where we had 40 people there out of 300. We had tables of like given 10 minutes, we give them a subject, we facilitators, we talked about it, and really good cohesion going. I think it's obviously social media, as Extra says, we're doing projects every month, there's updated focus going, but really it's conversations. We have a dedicated space at AGM now, but the AGM's fully dry. We have an hour of presentation conversations about the next year ahead. So these guys can maybe go into, because every island's different, but really I think it's when you get proactive. It's you know better listening guys when you're actually on the ground and in the islands, but the dry stuff doesn't really work. We probably got maybe 10 extra surveys and double that when you start having conversations.
Yeah, we did a roadshow early in March and got about 50 people there as well, which is good for 230. And that was interactive. And the power of that is you've got stats. You've got stats you can use to justify an awful lot of what you're doing. And I think if then, again, if the community can see that what you've asked them is actually developing into something they can see physically, rather than just being surveyed out, because they get consultation tired, don't they, really? And we've moved our AGM into more of a showcase and AGM. The AGM is the drive at the end, but make it more of a showcase of what we're doing, project updates, and just being more proactive and upbeat about it, really.
And the best way to get them in is coffee and cake.
I was going to say that.
Welcome.
And that's when folks start speaking, they're going to cup of tea and just
It doesn't feel like a survey or a consultation. It just
Yeah.
feels like conversation.
yeah. And some of the folk that are most not the most interesting, everything they say is interesting. It'll be the quiet person at the back or the side or whatever, but they're having a cup of tea and then they say, "Oh, I really like this idea, but have you thought about this?" And that's the folk that you want to. And you're never going to please everybody all the time.
Yeah, I think that I think more focus as well. I think in the past it's been a meeting, if folk come, if they don't come. We have sessions with the school, with lunch clubs, actually try and get community groups and trying to get the kind of wider, because if we just have an open space, not people actually will talk. So a lot one-to-one stuff. Like the last one we had a housing that we'd get in within 10 days, and Lisa phoned every 100 members, she phoned them to conversations with them. So it's time consuming, but that's where we got the real data. It's fine ticking a box, but getting the extra information. Have you thought about this? And to be honest, we've came in thinking we knew everything, and suddenly something totally radical and changed the project because two of the people's had experience. So it's really been good.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? The other side of that, have you had conflict you've had to deal with? How do you deal with conflict? There probably isn't any in that, maybe.
Always is. There's always somebody.
Someone going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to be polite, right? I mean,
You have to listen and
Yeah.
give them their time to get it off their chest.
Yeah,
And let them know that they're heard.
yeah,
And that's usually enough.
I think in Orkney's 30% an island that'll be really vocal supportive of trust. There's 5% that'll be very vocally against it, and the rest are Cajun ways.
Yeah.
If nothing to say, it was happy.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the way we've got. I think if you talk about potentially the demolition of the house, that's something you've influenced a lot of people. Not.
Yeah. Yeah, we did an open day in the house that we're looking to we did 2 days in the house that we're looking to knock down, and from the front it all looks very lovely and quaint, but when actually people came into the house and they saw and they felt how damp it was and they saw how thick the walls are and how long and narrow the house is, most of them had a change of heart when they came in, and I was able to explain, look, if we're putting extensions at the back, we're knocking down the back walls, we're taking off the roof because it needs replaced. We're going to have to strip the walls inside to re-insulate and reline. We're going to have to strip the walls outside and pick and point, and we're going to have to move some of the windows and the doors. So actually you're getting sentimental about the gable walls because they're the only thing that's not going to be touched. And suddenly you've got that, oh, okay, so that makes more sense, and financially it makes more sense, and so just being able to have that conversation rather than put it in the newsletter and say this is what we're doing because this is why. It was just a light bulb moment in all of their heads. I think we'd have met a lot more opposition to it had we not had those 2 open days.
Being very clear about what you're doing, consistent messaging, make sure your staff are on the same page and your board, and you all understand that this is why it's happening, and making sure the same message goes to anybody that's talking. Really, just be convinced that what you're doing is right, and nod politely.
I think it's very important if you're both like before our conference, the only pep talk that I gave was to the board and staff. I said, it's not them or they, it is us. You can, any conversation that if there's any conflict and somebody comes and says, well, why are you doing that? Don't say, oh, they decided it, because actually you can, as a board and as staff, you're having the conversation, you should be making a united decision. So,
first project I did, I really fell on my face. The first project, I was trying to be too efficient, given we'll finish it in March, and now I say spring. A lot easier, and I think the message for me is that when a project comes from a community, 95% of that project will evolve before it's finished, with some might be small little tweaks, but it's just being honest.
Yeah. Good. Anything else? Another one? Please.
I want to pick Davey's brains while I'm here. We do a lot of community land Scotland with communities that are going on they're doing a first acquisition. They might never have built a funding application before, and they can find it quite challenging. What you building better for you? What would your tips be for a community? Like, what should they be focusing on?
For me, it's Scottish Land Fund. It has to be the need. The need has to be there. Community support has to be there. Financially has to stack up. I need to have local support, local authority support. That's the 4 things. But for me, I do pre-feasibility work. So we go through a radical exploration of what it could be. But we're lucky is we've got development plans, we've got mandates, community that lets us do it. For groups that maybe not so mature, but so I would urge before they get to project exploration stage, they have to kind of a mandate from the community. If that's a 2-page or 20-page development plan, they'd have to have a buy-in. But in terms of the need, I'll be honest, part of our success is we've got very, very strong connections with our Scottish Land Fund advisors. I put nothing in cold. I'll probably talk about something 50 times before I even think something goes in. So it's going back and saying, I'll change that, or if you thought with that, or that's not going to add up, don't put a cold application.
And do you find it gets a lot easier when you're moving on to your seconds, thirds?
I find to chop a lot less through hoops than most people now, because I think it's confidence. I think there's a myth that people think you've got your Scottish Land Fund, that's you finishing another one. On the contrary, they want to support people there's confidence in. So I think that myth of get an application and go away, no, they'll keep supporting you as long as the need's there and they've got the confidence and the capacity. It's trust and confidence in a lot of things. So I would say maybe start small. Especially in housing, I've got a lot of people, I work a lot over Scotland, a lot of groups are looking at 10, 20, 50 houses. Start 2 or 3 or 4, prove the concept. To people think too big. I need to be brave, I need to be realistic.
Yeah.
Just a question about community strength and
Yeah.
Community support being, is it different in Orkney, do you think, or is there, because many of us have got scars from places where it's not quite strong as that.
I think it's easier in Highlands because the Highlands got a coastal barrier, coastal boundary, so you know your community well. I think there's less in the Orkney mainland's happening for various reasons. The communities are not so tighter because you don't know your neighbour from. I would say the structure of organisations are not mature. They don't have turbines, they don't have this, they don't have that. The islands have got a lot of fragility around it, but they've got their boundaries. So I don't know, you guys know 80% of people live in Ireland. You talk to them, there's far more conversations, you meet in the shops. I think there's more the tighter the community, stronger the results will be. But it's getting to the stage now where community support was a strong story on application, now it's mandatory.
Anybody else want to add to that?
No, I was going to say, make sure you give cake to the ferrymen, because the ferrymen are basically like your foghorn on the island, and they sell you the massive forum. Yeah, yeah. So make sure that people that are influencers, make sure you do look after them, and they know what's this as well.
On that point, we've got subgroups for our projects. We have our development trust directors on it. We've got technical people. We've got positive gossips as well on it as well. It's quite good as well. Spread the word, because there's nothing worse than being behind a rumor. So we all be ahead of the game.
Good, good. Yeah, as I said, I was looking at, I used to chair the Scottish Land Fund, but not till you came along. Before your time, and since 2017 to 2023, there's been 23 successful applications to Scottish Land Fund from Orkney, and interestingly, all from islands. Why not mainland?
Because they don't have the
Just for
structure.
the reasons you
They don't have a development trust. Very many won't.
Just an observation, I'm from a rural parish that's called Northern Island, we're in Dearness, and I do think that island communities like we've got represented, you do a fantastic job, and I probably have up to you. It is easier when you've got turbines to fund it, easier if you've got a development trust established, easier if you've got staff. But I also think there's a wee bit of, on the mainland, people think they're cozy, they're comfy, they're okay, there's nothing gonna happen, you know, the population is gonna stay reasonably sustainable. Young families are gonna stay in the parishes. Different in islands, I think you fight for your survival, and I think it's great you do that, but I would like to see more developments in rural parishes on the mainland as well. And that's why I'm here. I'm part of a group in the Dearness that took over an old church in 2009. And we do a lot of community things to do with heritage, and lots of other things like that as well. But we would like to go further, but it's taking that next step out into the unknown, getting probably a member of staff part-time to try and work with the community to develop more. Right. So
There's 2 live applications in Orkney Main at the moment, one in Strums, one in the Hope. So I think your point is, it's, I'm not saying it's easy, but capacity wise, it's quite easy for even a volunteer group to go through an application process. That's when the doors open, that's when the real hard work starts. So that's when you need your capacity then.
Okay. Maybe I'll ask our other 2 guests to join the panel, and have you got subs off the bench for
Peter, yeah.
if you're having to
Scarp.
meetings. So if you want to join the subs, Donna, would you like to come up and Chessa? And I think we'll just leave. I like that message at the end. We'll just leave it there. I think. The current Donna is better get it right. The Institute for Northern Studies at the UHI based here, and has studied a lot about Orkney and the history and cultures of Orkney. And we have just asked maybe for her to spend a few minutes giving us some views on that. And then alongside her is Chessa Couperwhite from Pines and Islands Enterprise, probably known to most of you. But Donna, if you could give us a little, you stand if you want. I'll use this because.
Well, I can sit down if you prefer. I'm very short. So you stand.
You're very tall on the screen.
Thank you so much.
The room is good enough.
I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, John. Well, one of the questions people often ask about Orkney is, why is it so entrepreneurial? Why is it so energetic? Why does it come up with all of these things? I mean, Lindsay was just saying that on the radio this morning. Why? Well, I've got a theory about it. And I'm now in the next 5 minutes, roll up your sleeves, folks, because I'm about to run through 8,500 years of history. This is an ancient place. This is a place that's had communities for a very, very long time. We start to see the development of communities in the Neolithic age, that's about sort of 4,000 BC to 2,500 BC, and that's when people start to come together. They stop being hunter-gatherers, they start to come together and be farmers and create communities. And we've seen this, we see this, we know that from the very earliest time, Orkney has literally been on the map. From the very earliest maps that we have, Orkney is there. It means something. It is not a remote place. It is a place that has got a very strong sense of identity. Somebody was saying there about the boundaries, the fact that we're on islands, that we know exactly what our scope is and where we are, and that we have structures like the Orkney Islands Council, and I don't discount that either as being a very powerful factor in the development and strength of Orkney's identity and what it does. You can see that if I had £1 for every time Keith, this taxi driver, had said to me about how disappointed he was with Highland Council. I once gave a presentation about place names, and the chap from the Caithness Courier got carried away and said academic calls for independence for Caithness, which was slightly but there's an element of truth in that. But so Orkney's story is a long story. People forget how old the place Scotland is. Got the oldest rocks in the world, for example, in Scotland, and Orkney is an old place that developed communities. First of all, we had those Neolithic peoples, then we had the Pictish peoples, and so on. And because Orkney was on the map, you might be surprised, folks, to know that this is the end of the Roman Empire. For example, that maybe comes as a surprise to the Arcadians, but according to Claudian rather, this is the end of the Roman Empire. Although Tacitus tells us, and he was a bit biased, he was writing about his father-in-law Agricola, that Agricola came to what was clearly Thurso, took one look at the Pentland Firth, said, the water looks awful thick here, boys, we'll not bother, and turned back. Although we do have evidence for the Romans in Orkney because of trade and pottery, places like that, because we're very much on the scene, we're always very much on the scene. And Orkney is one of these places that's the end of the known world. It's not the unknown world. And that is, of course, because we can see Orkney from Scotland, which, as we know, is another country and they do things differently there. This is mainland. Now, that's very important too. And of course, because we were on the world map, we attracted the attention of the Norsemen. I'm not going to call them Vikings because Viking is an occupation, not people. As you go Viking, right, into the Vicks, into the fields. That's what you do. Okay. So the most important thing, I think, the three most important things here is the development of communities, the structures that support them, and the people themselves, the attitude of the people themselves and where that comes from. So when the Norse came here, and they all came basically from the north of Norway and from a narrow strip between the mountains and the sea, and they took one look at Orkney and thought, woohoo, fertile southern pastures, we'll have that. We'll totally have that. And they came here and basically they overrode, to all intents and purposes, any of the cultures that had been here before. We only have 2 or 3 non-Norse place names left in Orkney, for example. One of them is Clindon, if anybody's interested there. But no, they basically made this land their own in every single possible way that they could, down to the genetics, down to the names, down to everything else. And even, we were talking about housing, even the shape of the room that we're in today. It's one of the things that the Norse brought with them, these houses. The houses that we had before that, they were, of course, cloverleaf houses and round houses. So they're very fundamental in the development of this particular place. But the most important thing that they brought with them, that was absolutely fundamental to who they were, was their sense of community. The most important thing in a Norse person's life is the community. The worst thing that can happen to you is to be thrown out of that community. It's worse than death. For example, we get Gunnar in Njal's saga is exiled from Iceland. He gets to the coast and he thinks, no, I'm going to go home. I'm going to be with my own people. He knows this means the end of all things. And indeed, he suffers a difficult Norse fate in that one. But the notion of community is incredibly important. And the importance of people in that community, because we mustn't forget that Orkney and Shetland were Norse colonies. People came here, they made lives. Everybody that was in that community was important. The women were important. Women had better rights under Norse law than we had in this country until the Married Women's Property Act at the end of the 19th century. And we could vote, ladies. Oh, yes. Right? Not all of us, the ones with property could vote. But the fact of the matter is they developed a community which put the importance of the community as a whole above everything else. Everybody worked together. There was no sense of status either. There was no feudal system, nothing like that. You were what was called a bwanda, a good man. That's who you were. And I'm always very struck by the picture of the visit of King George V here in 1935, with the whole of the basin down at the harbour there is full of men with abnormally large flat caps. I don't know what was going on there, but you know, they're shed and shade, and not one of them have taken their hat off. Right. Now that's not disrespect. That's because why would they? Because we're all working together on this land. We're all working together in this place, and nobody's better than anybody else. So that's why the Jarls also had to spend so much time boozing people up, and you're talking about your teen cakes and stuff like that. It's a feature. But that's what they did. Spent the winters did it because nobody was obliged to follow them. It's only if they wanted to, we thought they were worth following. But the concept of the community and working for the community and making it work. That's another thing that Orcadians are very good at making things work. They're very resourceful. They're very adaptable as well. And the concept of the democracy that we have too, which is something that the Norse occupation of Scotland, which lasted over 1,000 years, by the way, we just don't know about it because it happened just before Scotland became a kingdom. And all the big heroes in Scottish history are all the Southwest boys like Bruce and Wallace, people like that. They're not Sigurd or Thorfinn or any of these great figures at all. But we have handed over a strong sense of social democracy that is a feature of Norse communities. And the fact that everybody has a say, everybody should be included. You were saying, but that's it, all the time. Absolutely. But there's other things as well. One of the things I wanted to say a little bit too was about, well, of course, we weren't handed over to Scotland until 1492. One February afternoon in 1492, we were handed over, as we all know, as part of a dowry. The impecunious Christian of Denmark said to James III, "I'm got any money at the moment, you'll just have these a wee minute and we'll get it sorted." Not so far. But what happened all of the time that the Norse influence was being lessened in Scotland, the last place it was lessened was Orkney and Shepherd. So we kept Udal law. And that was a very important thing because in our coat of arms, we have a Udler standing in. The word Udal actually comes from the term for heritage or inheritance. So it's all about your relationship to the land. And it's entirely different, and it's still relevant today. For example, the last big Udal case was 1991, the Lerwick Port Authority against the Salmon Fishers Association. And it was to do with who owned the land under the sea. Because in Scots law, the ownership of land goes to as far as the high water mark. Under Udal law, it's the length of the astronomical tide, or rather more attractively, as it used to be, how far you could ride a horse out under the sea was yours as well. You might be interested to know that this is the only place, Orkney is the only place in the British Isles where the swans are not the property of the Queen. Or beg your pardon, the King. She was there. They are the property of the people, just like the cathedral. Not that I suggest you all run from here wielding cudgels or anything like that to do away with them, but they are. So that's another thing. There's a different mindset. There's a different understanding of how things can work and how things can be developed. And that's why these things work incredibly well. Now, and this has continued throughout the history. I could talk about the Vikings forever, and I know I don't have a lot of time, John, and you're giving me the cold eye in a moment. But all the way through our history, we've adapted, we've changed, we've developed, made the best of everything. You know, one of my favourite stories is, in fact, I've seen it, it's the depiction of when the Hudson's Bay Company had nearly 99% of the staff of that were Orcadians at one stage. And if you look at the museum in Winnipeg, the normal canoe, right, for going 6 months into the hinterland is full of resources. The Orcadian canoe appears to have a pair of knickers and a toothbrush in it. Nothing else, and you're basically living off the land. So it's a sense of, it's that huge sense of managing, adapting, changing, and so on that took us through 2 world wars. And I mean, my own building, Scots House, was the main office of HMS Sparrowhawk there at Hadston, but round the back I've got an 8,000-year-old dirt house. So we all know who we are, right? We know where we came from. We stand on this ground ourselves. And I just want to finish up by telling you a little bit about a project that I was involved in during lockdown. It was called Changescapes of Recovery. And it was looking at across the Highlands and Islands. And it was looking at the 4 main case studies in that. And I was in charge of the Orkney one. And the Orkney one was completely different from every other case study. For example, in the first lockdown, there were no fewer than 47 new businesses created here. which is a completely different story from the other areas which we were looking at, which was Westray Ross, and the deprived areas of Inverness and Caithness. It was a completely different story. What people did when they saw something that was going wrong, the community came together like it always does, and that really actively, and they saw opportunities in development. So they're not at all, you know, here we're not curtain twitchers. When I first came back to Orkney, I was quite astonished about how many people would go up in my window, right? Because I live on the main road coming from south. The two agricultural lecturers at the college would say to me, "Oh, I see you've shifted that ornament in the front, Donna, or is that new curtains you've been getting?" Completely unashamed and interest in everything and involvement, because we're all part of the same story. We are all part of the saga, and we are all heroes when it comes to defending this place. I'm going to stop there because I can see John looking at me.
It's probably going to have 4,000 years and 10 minutes. Is, you know, very good for that, you know, setting like the historical and cultural context. I think is actually very important. The Gaels call it Dukas, you know, that sort of heritage and belonging sort of, and there are distinctive features here, I think, in Orkney that you don't get elsewhere, and you can explain those very nicely. Thank you. And when we were walking around Rodgar yesterday, and just one of the boards, I hadn't realised the dug a ditch right around the Stonings, and they talk about it as a community project. It's the community that dug the ditch, and that sense of community and collective effort seems to be deep-seated. Chessa, bringing it into the modern era, Highlands and Islands enterprise, dear to my heart. Should involvement here, and how can we help, and where have you helped? And I've certainly heard mentioned 2 or 3 times. I has a role and has played a role here.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it's fair to say that over the last few years, I have watched the development trusts in the Isles grow in capacity and confidence, and it's been a joy to watch that. They've started off with small, well, when I say they started off with small projects, I wouldn't call a 900 kilowatt turbine particularly small, but in terms of their community assets, latterly they've started off with small scale projects and have developed into bigger and more complex ones. Perhaps one of the more complex ones being the Smithy, which I know Lisa talked about earlier. But in terms of what HIE can do to support organisations who are looking at asset acquisition and development, is we can support you through the process and help you to build capacity to look at what you need to take on. We're very knitted into the local support organisations, so we can signpost effectively to who's best to provide support, not just on a local level, but also on a national level. We know the landscape of support that's available out there. We've worked with a number of organisations to help them produce their local development plans, which were mentioned during a couple of the presentations. I know the local development plans are particularly useful when it comes to funding applications, because it demonstrates that the community has been engaged with and consulted and supports what's in the development plan, and that can really be incredibly valuable to help planters acknowledge the fact that the project is needed and wanted by the community. So we've supported, I think most of your development plans have been supported by us. They tend to have a sort of 3 to 5 year longevity, so they need to be refreshed on a regular basis. We can also assist organisations with post-acquisition development support. So if there are particular packages of funding that need to be put together, HIE can be involved in that funding mix. We can also signpost to other forms of funding, because again, we're well knitted into the funding landscape and know who's best placed to provide funding for particular sorts of projects. I think it's true to say that most projects now need a complex cocktail of funding in order to make them come together. So it's about knowing which funder to apply to and when. But basically, we can go along the journey with you and help signpost you to and support as and when required. We also can assist with things that might be required for particular funding applications, such as helping you demonstrate that you meet the Fair Work criteria, and perhaps more recent is carbon neutral action plans. So all of these sort of things are coming more and more into requirements that you need to consider when you're completing funding applications. But basically, we're here and we're happy to speak to folk about their projects, and please get in touch if there's a particular project that you've got in mind.
Thank you, Chessa. Any questions of Mary?
Actually from Grace, it's coming in, it was figured out.
Mary is monitoring
The live stream chats.
live stream, and people do put questions on through the live stream. Sorry, Meg, I should have mentioned that.
All right, so Grace was hired by Donna's presentation and had a question that I think is probably good for everyone. She said, do you think there's a shortcut to creating this community unity?
Oh, what a nice thought, and we could just bottle it now. That's another entrepreneurial initiative. In his neck of the woods. Well, I think things like COVID, things that make people draw together are ways that and when we're faced with things like depopulation, that's another thing that when we're facing an actual crisis, I'm afraid it's like people would stop fighting if the Martians landed, for example. As soon as the Martians land, we all become the same team, right? Because there's that external force. So really, that's what I'm trying to say. Is sometimes it needs a powerful external force to hothouse something like this.
Have there been any other points or comments or?
First one, but also they will spur the others on to realize they get their
Spoken, yes.
Yeah, nice. It's good to ask about the experience of maybe, because all of you should agree, in terms of our community land movement versus the rest of Scotland. And in working with Community Energy Scotland, I've seen lots of examples of community land organisations, community organisations, and even through politics, nationally, you see such a different atmosphere and discourse around community land movement around the rest of Scotland and in Orkney, to the degree that I was speaking to Josh, the political colleague that Lindsay talks about, and saying, what do you do in Orkney? What is there to do? And he says, well, in terms of policy, it's not really the same, because you have a really good track record of applying to the land fund. You sort of get on with it and you do very project-based things. We know the history of lairds and estates, retaking land from, well, not to the same degree as, say, the Western Isles, or big parts of Ireland. I'm just wondering if folks have any thoughts on what's the future of the community land movement in Orkney, and they're just going to be, project-based and asset-based, because one of the like to see it largely stemmed to kind of the community energy movement in Orkney, rather than a need to retake community lands from estates and lairds like elsewhere.
Thank you. Just to summarise that question really about the difference between what's happening in Orkney and what's happening in the mainland of Scotland in terms of land reform and land ownership patterns. They're quite different, and there's different issues.
Well, if I could maybe just say something, there's a very fundamental thing that is different about Orkney, and certainly in the rest of the Highlands in Scotland, or Orkney, is we don't have crofts. And for all of you out there, the croft is the land, it's not the house. Oh, dogs and the trackers. But we don't have that. We don't have that kind of relationship with the land. And here in Orkney, when it comes to agricultural land, we tend to have a different setup as well. Big farms don't have that crofting. So there's a fundamental perception of land use that is entirely different.
Yeah, any other? Were areas cleared in any of the islands?
Well, Rousay.
Yes. I think, I'd just like to say, I can only reference really Rousay. I'm a little bit kind of parochial, really. You can tell I'm not an Orcadian, but I had the fortune of going to primary school and then secondary school, and my class was all Orcadian. I was the only English person sometimes in my whole year. So, and that's where I developed the love and recognition of the value of the community. it took me literally decades to get my head around the idea that everybody that you saw every day was related to. It took me yeah, certainly when I lived here when I went to school here, really I missed that altogether. I think only later life I kind of got that. Now that's changed, and on Rousay it's changed hugely. I mean, the number of what I would call kind of people with Orcadian grandparents and great grandparents is now maybe a quarter of the island, and every year, and in particular since COVID, every year a huge swathe of new people coming to the island. What I would say is that actually the island, to some extent, creates that culture of community. It forces you. Now, I speak to my good friend Alistair Marwick, who was born in Ennister 75 years ago, and he is a true Orcadian. And he said there were two things in his lifetime that have changed around him. One is was when hydro came, when electrical power, and the second one was very much the ferry. And it transformed the community because the dependency on your neighbour was dramatically reduced because you could take the car. So I've seen that transformation, and what I also have seen over the last 5 or 6 years is the kind of storming and norming. When people come from wherever they come, they bring their own understanding of culture, and they think that's the best way of doing things. And it takes them a while to really kind of start to learn that and knock the edges off that. And in the process, they usually upset quite a few people the way. So there's continuous, you almost like call it turmoil. And it takes quite a bit of getting used to. That's my experience. Something Stuart didn't mention was that 5 or 6 years ago, no, it's less than that, just at the beginning of COVID, the whole community split, and there was a counter to take over the development trust there. So it's not necessarily all roses. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and because it would have destroyed a lot of good work. The clearances, the Highland clearances, took place in the island clearances. General Burrows in Condell, which when you went around the island, it's quite noticeable. It's walled off because the wall was built to keep the sheep in and keep the people out. I mean, the land is probably because of because it looks out onto the Atlantic and is swept by the Atlantic. You get a storm, it just rolls right in there more than anywhere else on the island. It's probably the value of that land is probably less than anywhere else. But you can see where those people went when you go over into Wester. The hills, if you look carefully, you can see all the houses that were built really on land that was absolutely must have been horrendous to live on, because they had to go somewhere. They just got pushed out. And that's remembered. It's still kind of in. Certainly the Orcadian folk still kind of understand them.
It's an interesting point. I mean, Stuart pointed out to us in Rousay that he thought that the demographic makeup was 20% Indigenous and 80% incomer. Would that be?
Well, I said a quarter, so 25. Yeah, I mean that's very rough.
Is that common in the other islands? I don't know the situation.
It's getting more common. Yeah. I think when we were young, it was much less, especially in Westray, it was much less incomers, but these days that was unusual to have incomers.
Oh yeah.
These days it's much more like
They have a thing in Westray where people couldn't buy a house in Westray unless they had some connection to the land. One time. Long time ago.
Oh,
not that I'm aware of.
No.
That's maybe an unspoken thing.
Yeah. I did hear a lady say that Westray meet folk that hadn't been to Ireland with pitchforks and like dating serious. Didn't realise I was from Westray, and I'm sitting there going, yeah.
But no, I think we would need the incomers these days to keep the island.
Yeah.
We're still with it.
Yeah, we're still going to be quite a nice few folk that have moved in, but it's definitely like twin. You would have kept everybody in the island, and you still do, but there is folk that knew him, like on the boat this morning. I was looking, thinking, do they live here? I'm not sure, but I guessed it eventually. So
I
it's definitely-
visited E-Day some years ago, and one of the interesting things they were saying there was that incomers, kids had gone away, and they were coming back. The return migrants were actually the offspring of previous incomers, which because I think they valued growing up in that, as children, growing up in that kind of community, were coming back as adults. And certainly the island of Egg that we know is classic. A lot of the activists and active people on the island and the childbearing age are the children of people that had moved to the island. And the children growing up, moved away and back, and coming back with skills and somebody's capital to invest and put their energy into that, into their childhood community. I don't know if that's was an unusual thing or not.
Well, I think it's got an awful lot to do with technology too. My husband spent 16 years trying to get him a job back in Orkney, back in the day. And now there are so many opportunities with technology, and it's now a viable thing to be living in what some people, not me, would call a remote place. Because as I say to them, remote from what? London is remote to me. Thank you very much. But you know, it's a completely different workplace, if you like. People can work in these places. They can do as viable a job as anybody. And again, since COVID, it's made it the norm for people to be working from home, working in that way. I always used to find I sit on a number of national and international committees that are an awful lot of old men, no offence, folks, on them, and technology could not be used. Right, I would have to go away for 2 days for a meeting. Then along comes COVID. They're on Zoom, and oh, here's my cat. You know, and so it's completely changed too. So that will be a strength in the years to come, that people can live a life in a completely different way than they were able to do before. But the question about people coming into islands is a very interesting one, because as you see, it's if it's lifeblood that's keeping the place a living community, then that's incredibly important. And the late great Bashir Ahmed, who was the first Asian MSP in the Scottish Parliament, said it doesn't matter where we come from, it matters where we're all going together at the end of the day. So it's about, you know, whether you want a thriving community or not. And for the Norse, to hark back to my favourite topic, the Norse, they were very welcoming of people came into community as long as they were prepared to work and to contribute. That was the important thing. It was essential to do that for the use of resources. So again, Orkney bucks the trend in that way, with the fact that our population is increasing in an interesting way, not necessarily the demographic that's of most Jews, but it is increasing, unlike other places, for a number of reasons to do with the environment which we find ourselves too, but also the community. It's generally speaking welcoming if you're prepared to be part of the community, if you're prepared to fulfil your role in that way.
Yeah.
I think that population, though, you're saying our forms are increasing. We still published action plan, shows all the islands and some of the Linn towns as population expected to decrease. So while Kirkwall and Stromness and some other areas, our populations are going to increase. The outer islands and North Island are just small.
What we're finding is it's the bulk of the folk that are coming in are retirement or almost retirement age. They're looking to maybe slow down for 5 years and then retire, or they're already retired. Yeah, we need people who are going to come in and fulfill roles that we're creating with things like Smithy and the school.
Coming into
Yeah, that's why your involvement with housing and being able to devise your local lettings policy is really valuable.
Yeah,
because you can target the demographic that you need to come into your community.
Yeah, whereas the council can't do that with their properties.
And I think that's the answer to the question earlier, that this is really important, because it's not really for the islands a question of shall we say restoring some kind of balance from the injustices of the feudal system of the past, because of this Scottish the land reform at the end of the 19th century. But it's more to do with this changing out of people and the continuous. You know, people are coming and going at a faster rate now on Rousay than than anybody. And I think, you know, just what you were reflecting on, people are coming and you don't know who they are. And this for many Orcadians is really very strange. You know, again, I refer back to my good friend Alistair. He would know every car on the island. You know, you know just when it was going down the road, you know who was in it. And probably be related to half the people. So it's completely different because now you see people come and you know, who are these people? Where do they live? And some people have the ability to be more connected and know what's going on. But I think why community ownership of land is so important is because if there's going to be a strategy to try and redress the balance, because you know I'm a retired person. I left. I went to school here. I moved here at the age of 11. Did my schooling here and left. Although my family retained a very small, modest property in Rousay, which was a holiday home we came back to, and then I retired here. So very much fit into that because at that time there wasn't work for me. If there'd been work for me, I would have probably stayed. But what I wanted to do, the opportunity wasn't here. But if we're going to influence sustaining a community where and a thriving community has to have a balance across all the age ranges. If we're going to do that, then we have to take control and make it happen. And that's not going to happen if you just leave it at the market forces. You know, Maggie Thatcher, eat your heart out. It's not going to happen with the islands. We have to have a strategy that influences it, and we have to get finances from somewhere to be able to enable that so that we can attract people with the right skills and the right age to be able to sustain that community. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a retirement home, and actually getting people to look after, to care for the elderly is almost impossible at some of the time. So it is quite fragile what's there, and yet more and more people come and retire to Orkney. You know, they see it. At least I had some kind of previous history, which went back to actually the father's father, so it went back some years. But a lot of people just arrive. You know, they buy the house on spec, and they turn up, and then they bring their own culture with it, and this is the way you do things. And it's like, well, no, actually, it's not. And it maybe takes them a year or two to actually start to understand that island life isn't maybe the panacea that they thought it was. Yes, please.
I was going to say, actually, slight in defence of income, it's actually people who come here, they either fit in or they don't, and if they don't, they tend to go away after a few winters rather than summers, or they just stick to their own thing. But just to be honest, I said about demographics, because I saw some information about demographics that's very interesting. We definitely have a problem with people in the 20s and 30s in terms of that balance. But the fact that people are here live longer is actually, well, one, I think it's a good thing. I'm looking forward to living older. But up here, people are actually healthier for a longer period of time. And so what you've got is a lot of retired people who are healthy, who are volunteering. And I think that's one of the assets we've got up here, such as yourself on the Rousay Trust. And I think that's one of the things we've got, and I think it's one of the things we can actually use a lot of. Because actually, it's not people living all of the problem, it's the period that they're ill towards our end of our lives and need the care. But we also need that balance, which is exactly what you're doing with the Development Trust in terms of trying to bring that younger people in and keep the younger people in and get that balance. Yeah, so I can say in defence of somebody's approaching it as
For the online listeners, the question about demographics and the role that older people who are healthier longer can play in that voluntary. I'm a champion for people who are retired as well. So that is an important function. Same in all the islands. Are you getting retirees coming to live in Westray and
very much so. And some of them do get involved, but some of them just choose to buy their bit of land and they
that's where they are.
Yeah. They go on the boat, they go and do the shopping, and they come back and they close their doors, and that's just where they are. And are trying to get away from that. And
do you have sorry, that's a question on this one. Do you have the same problem here that you get in many parts of the mainland and the Argyll Islands in particular, or second homes and holiday homes?
No, we don't have
sense that?
No.
Because if you, the houses are there, even though it's retired people in them, there are people in them.
Yeah,
And they're not
absolutely.
sitting empty for.
The only issue we find is that these older people tend to come with a bit more money behind them, so they're able to push the prices of the property up, and it completely takes young people off the, So, but you would
No. And I think 20 years ago, again, trying to do the math and thinking, yeah, it's 20 years ago. Like there was still a lot of property in land, especially like when I bought, or when I got married and we bought our first house, there was literally one house, there was one choice. And it was unheard of that a young couple had bought a house in the island, and then there's lots of houses, or sometimes there's like swings and rounds of houses again, there'll be a lot of houses, but the young folk can't afford to buy them because the prices are just astronomical, which is why it's so good. The Shapinsay plot scheme, you can help them a penny bit, because I'm lucky, my dad's a farmer, so I got a nice bit of land.
The analysis of the recent Scottish Land Fund successful applications, 13 of them included housing. And I know that most of you will probably have some kind of burden on the housing, so that somebody just can't buy it and then sell it. Or they have to have some kind of, once you build it,
we need to become a rural housing body first to do that. That's happening in the next month or two, I think.
Any people who haven't had a chance to speak or urgently want to speak, but then thought they might not, but please do if you want, if you wish, because we'll be closing up.
I've had a chance to speak, but I've got a question.
Well, nobody else, I'll hear into the second cabinet. Nobody else, but if not, Lindsay, yes, certainly.
It's quite a technical question. I was going to do a bit of presentation on the land reform bill, and then when I was reading it, I was thinking actually very little of this is relevant to Orkney, because we're going to bring in transfer tests for the land is sold over 1,000 hectares or more than 25% of an island, and I was wondering, are there any land holdings in Orkney? It seems like most of the land holdings here are much smaller.
Yeah.
There aren't any that would be over 25% of an island. And
no.
Hence, does that mean Orkney is the future for the rest of Scotland? You know, if we start getting estates broken up, are we going to end up with the level of activity that we've got happening in Orkney?
Yeah, no, I just follow up. Maybe don't ask you. I mean, were there large estates in Orkney that have been broken up?
No, not really.
No.
There was estate, and there were some estates, but and there was the Balfour estate in Shapinsay, but not to the same extent as we have today in the Highlands, for example. It's which is basically stultified all possible development of any kind. These large sporting estates, and the sooner there's got up, the better, right? But
wishing to be political.
Not at all. The fact of the matter is that they are preserved in aspect for a particular purpose.
Sure.
And that's not been the same here.
Yes, back.
Publishing fhearainn came here about 1650 in East Granby. Various estates within Orkney, meaning the Breckness estate, and there were subsequent estates, and as part of what they call the settlement again was the fairness with the Balfour estates. There were estates everywhere. The Heddens came here about 1850, and they bought the 80 from the who's in Parkdale. Lanes of Parkdale, right? So in this historical estate thing, Harry is known as the parish of 100 lands, because that's where they broke the back of the estate holders. I mean, it's very much a tradition of estates in Orkney. When Ham was the Grahams. Lingro belonged to the Grahams. Bishop Graham had Lingro and Caldy when you name it.
Doing the almost all like the place I'm in. I think when you bought that book in
And the that's when they started to break up, and then the tenants became owners. It's on from the Crofters Commission about 1850.
Yeah.
That was the big change.
And land reform in the 1890s, there was quite a lot of land reform, wasn't it? The 1890s when they started to divide up.
That was the Crofters Commission. Yeah. And then it worked two ways. Usually, you know, along the the rent for the tenants, and then that effectively bankrupted the estate. It was always Cromwell houses, got up to their eyeballs in hawk, and then they were living a lifestyle that tenants couldn't afford to keep them in.
And my history really is not very good, but I seem to remember something about an enabling movement, which enables basically the tenants to buy the land, and that's one of the reasons why when you look across the Orkney landscape, it's divided up into, and it was just small, 30 to 40 acres of land, and that's what shaped the whole of the Orkney land.
That's correct. That's and transformation in townships and rates and whatever have you go. It's basically people living in a holding ground like rabbits.
So I talked about my good friend Alistair Marwick at Egilsay and Rousay, and his father was one of 13, and he had to buy his farm in Egilsay off the other 13 siblings, but his but the ancestor before that actually was involved in acquiring land, but there was payment to be made. And really, I think it's only in Alice's lifetime that kind of whole debt thing has got sorted out. So, so it's taken about 100 years to kind of get it all sorted.
People live in townships, and you go around Westmeath and you go around Stoney, and you see the flagstones that are there in fences. And at Binscott, I think long ago, when Binscott is famous, you've got the flagstones and the fences. Those are the stones off the roof of houses. I mean, if you go up to Big Stone Stench, you'll probably find a cluster of ruins and houses up there, and that was a township. That's probably supposed to a township. And you see, it's a matter of evolution and how things develop. I mean, there was the structure and the ownership and the tenancy change, and then the Victorians brought in their version of things, and this is when things got scaled up and built up. Stone and Sandy was a model farms that came out of what much further on. Something to do with the farming soldiers.
My husband's family often found it. So I think there was a big house, his grandfather thought there was a big house. So in Sandy, which I think.
See, one of the things that evolved also was the animals. I mean, at one time, we still have the Shetland poo and the Shetland sheep and the Lowry sheep. But the Victorians, again, they improved stuff, and the animals got bigger, and the crops got better, and so on. So it's not just one thing. And flip the page in another world. It's not that transformational, it's evolution.
Thank you, Melissa. It's an interesting thing to, the way land ownership patterns have changed in Orkney over the last 2 centuries is actually very interesting, let alone the previous several hundred centuries. I mean, the things are. Look, I think we'll maybe draw this to a halt, and thank you very much for everybody participating. I've been very impressed coming back to see the energy and activity that's going on in this part of the world. And I'm just trying to summarise what I've heard today as to what factors have maybe contributed to that, towards that in Orkney. And in no particular order, I've certainly heard that well, it's not one you would normally supported agencies. You don't hear that everywhere we go. So, local authority, DTAS, Community Around Scotland to an extent, have all been important. And this has all been done without European money. remember the days when we used to have European money doing this and so your success, your collective success in being able to tap into funding sources has been remarkable, given the fact that funding sources are all getting scarcer and tighter everywhere we go. But you've been energetic and innovative enough to find them and exploit them, but with supportive agencies behind you would be one important factor, I would say. Another one is having a wind turbine helps.
Yes.
And those that have got it, you know, when you get what's Shapinsay, have you ever used a wind turbine?
No, Pappy doesn't, and you know that's
Well, that certainly was an innovation that was very welcomed in the noughties, at least. And at the time, you got a decent price for the electricity as well, and you got incentives to do it. And that has been a real driver for further activity. The other thing I've felt is that you build on success. I mean, you get one success, seems to build confidence in going for something else. And we can do that well. Maybe we can do that as well. And there's a building up of confidence. I was quite taken by one of you saying that the confidence that being able to be involved, a young person being able to be involved, gave them confidence to do once they left or went and did other things. So it's that confidence building thing that results from initial successes. Couple of more, I mean, peer support. Sorry, are you?
Yeah, just catching about at 4 o'clock. So.
I should have mentioned transport. Peer support. I'm getting a sense of people working together and development trust talking to each other. This is one of the weird benefits of COVID in a way, that we all have to speak to each other in a different way, and we're able to do it without having to catch ferries and the rest. There's a historical and cultural factor built into the DNA almost of this place, which helps. And I think maybe just to finish, that having a purpose seemed to be very important. And I remember when I was involved in this kind of activity, we were always being asked to measure success. What does success look like in order to justify public investment? And you talked about jobs, and you talked about improved assets, and you talked about financial sustainability and income generation. But I always came back almost, especially in small rural communities, how many kids in the primary school? That seemed to me to be a measure of success. That if your school had kids in it, then that community had a degree of health. That those, and we've had communities where the schools closed because there just aren't enough kids, and that seems to be the spiral. So thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions, questioners and presenters. Anything more you want to finish off with, Lindsay, in terms of Community Land Scotland's role here?
Yeah, I mean,
we only have
members. Yeah, we've only got Rousay, our only member in Orkney, so lovely to see more members from Orkney. I think it, like from our point of view, it's going to be great to be able to share your stories with the rest of our membership. I just think it's so interesting, the momentum that you've got going up here. So thank you so much for coming along today and sharing those stories.
And thank you to the people online who have listened to this. And hopefully, and to finish with, you must help us get rid of these cupcakes.
Yeah, most important thing.
They're seasonal, they're Easter theme. We do want you to take them away, otherwise my two colleagues will eat them up.
Thank you very much.